Good morning, everyone. Morning, Mr. Hitt. Welcome to this morning's allowable ex parte. I'll ask Mr. Melchers to please read the docket.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioners, we're here pursuant to notice of request for allowable ex parte briefing. The party requesting the briefing is Secretary of Commerce Robert M. Hitt III. We are here today in the Commission's hearing room. We were scheduled for September 19th at 10 a.m. and our subject matter to be discussed today is commerce overview, current economic development activity, and role energy plays in recruiting and growing business. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. We'll take appearances from the parties now.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Commission, my name is Karen Manning. I'm the Chief Legal Counsel for the Department of Commerce. I think Mr. Melchers has already told you why we're here today. With me today are members of our executive team, our agency head, Secretary Bobby Hitt, Deputy Secretary Jennifer Fletcher, Director of Global Business Development Nelson Lindsay, Michael McInerney, who is our Director of External Affairs, and Alex Clark, who is Director of Marketing and Communications. Secretary Hitt will give the briefing on behalf of the department, and the members of the rest of our team, along with Secretary Hitt, will be available for any questions. Thank you, Secretary Hitt.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Welcome. Mr. Nelson, I think you probably have a few instructions for us.
I do, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jeff Nelson. I'm Chief Counselor for the State Office of Regulatory Staff, and I'm here today in the capacity as the designee for the Executive Director of ORS for the allowable ex parte to be presented by the Department of Commerce. As the ORS representative, it's my duty to certify that the records of this proceeding are sent to the Chief Clerk of the Public Service Commission within 72 hours of this hearing. I also need to confirm to the Chief Clerk that this hearing was conducted in compliance with the provisions of South Carolina Code Annotated Section 58-3-260, which is the allowable ex parte statute. It is my sole responsibility and statutory duty in these proceedings to attend the briefing and file a written certification that such briefing was conducted in compliance with the provisions of this section, that being 58-3-260C6A1. I am not here to act as a referee, a judge, or a hearing officer. I do not and cannot represent the Commission staff, or the presenters. It is the purpose, it needs to be incumbent upon the people participating in the hearing today to ensure that they are acting in compliance with 58-3-260. The main provision of that is that the allowable ex parte needs to be limited to the issue which was noticed. And in this case, that is, as Mr. Melchers already indicated, a commerce overview, current economic development activity, and role energy plays in recruiting and growing business. So it's a pretty broad subject. I think you can go pretty much where you want to there. We would therefore ask that everyone please refrain from addressing anything that is not covered by that notice subject. Additionally, the allowable ex parte statute prohibits any participants, commissioners, or commission staff from requesting or giving any, quote, commitment, predetermination, or prediction regarding any action by any commissioner as to any ultimate or penultimate issue which either is currently pending before or may come before the Commission. Finally, I would ask the participants, commissioners, and staff attempt to refrain from referencing any reports, articles, statutes, or documents that aren't included in the materials already. If so, then we need to track those down because those have to become a part of the record that is certified to the clerk. For everybody that is in the audience, as well as all of the commissioners and staff, you should have signed in when you came in this morning. You should have picked up a form. Please make sure that you review, that you read that form, and that you sign it and turn it back in before you leave. Occasionally people forget to turn those in, and then we got to track you down. So if you would just do that, we would appreciate it. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. All right, Mr. Hitt, the floor is yours. And let's make sure we get you cut on there on that microphone. Punch that little button. Whoop, once again, it's not on yet. Now you are.
Okay. You can hear me? I generally don't have that much difficulty being heard, so I appreciate
I'm glad you
some
said that, not
instruction.
me. So,
Anyway, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners, good morning, and thank you for the opportunity to be here. Our team recently provided some background information to serve as an introduction to the South Carolina Department of Commerce. In short, Commerce is the state's lead economic development agency. Our job is to recruit and retain business, which equates to creating opportunities and choices for all South Carolinians. Over the last 8.5 years, we've built pretty incredible momentum. The reality is, over the last 25 years, that's how long the agency's been in existence. A lot of momentum here in South Carolina. And since 2011, when I was approved for this job, we've recruited more than 1,200 economic development projects, about 135,000 new jobs, and $37.9 billion with a B in capital investment. Building on that momentum, just last year in 2018 alone, we recruited more than $4.1 billion in new investment and an estimated 14,000 jobs. Business is changing constantly, and we have to be ready. Energy is a very big factor in corporate location decisions. Some key considerations are cost of service to the site, starting up and ongoing, reliability and rate. Recent changes to Act 258 remove the consideration of economic development from the Office of Regulatory Staff. That is why I am here today. We believe economic development is a critical consideration in evaluating rate cases, and it's important to the future of South Carolina. Consistent, reliable, flexible energy plays a huge part in a company's decision for location and future development. BMW is a great example. I can speak about it having, wait a minute, I jumped. Yeah. It's a great example. We began as a $600 million investment to create 500 jobs. That was almost 30 years ago and has grown exponentially. To date, BMW has invested more than $10 billion in South Carolina, employs approximately 11,000 people in the upstate. For 25 years, BMW's presence has driven the dramatic growth of the automotive sector. 400 automotive-related businesses, 40 Tier 1 suppliers operating in South Carolina. BMW North America Supply Network has grown from 22 companies in 1992 to more than 300 companies today. Close to zero automotive workers in 1992, and there's 72,000 people working in the automobile industry in South Carolina today. The multiplier effect, other international powerhouses, Mercedes-Benz, Volvo cars, could look to BMW's success and see the potential for similar growth. When BMW established its South Carolina facility, they had special needs for startup and ongoing electricity. South Carolina was able to be flexible in working with them. BMW is a proven case study of how one company saying yes can be so impactful and transformative. Energy is also increasingly important to existing and prospect companies, such as advanced composite companies such as Toray, Century, and Nucor. Reliability of the energy network is almost as important as the rate. Flickers in electricity, rubber melts, hardens in machines, shuts a plant down. In some cases, can render a plant useless. Utility companies are key partners in product development with the state and help identify, make ready sites for prospects. So they're all part of the economic development team. Timelines get condensed very quickly. Companies expect to have utilities in place and shovel-ready sites within a few months. For Team South Carolina to be competitive, there is more work to be done to raw dirt than ever before. At present, there isn't a process for addressing prospects with special electric needs. One of the things you may see coming from Commerce in the near future will be a letter requesting a process to think through how special rates could be considered so that we meet company timelines and confidentiality. I cannot overstate the importance of energy in a corporate location and expansion decisions. We believe economic development is a critical consideration when evaluating rate cases. And I appreciate your time and attention to this matter. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have. I or any member of my staff can add to that statement.
Thank you, Mr. Hitt. Commissioners, any questions? One question, I thought we had economic development rates with every utility.
What we have, and I have some people here that are probably smarter than me about this, we have what we call a rider system with most of the utilities, with all of the utilities, I believe, wherein they will be a sort of a discount for a period of time as an entry price that sits on top of the posted rate. All of that is, to my understanding, all in place. What happens is from time to time we'll get a special request. Let me give you an example of one. I remember a Friday afternoon about a year and a half ago, I got a call from a site consultant that told me they were pulling out of another state where they were negotiating, and that if he gave me a specific rate, if you could get me a rate of like 4.1 cents per kilowatt hour for 300 megawatts or some enormous amount of power, I could bring you 3,000 jobs and a $2 billion company. So at that point, the key issue was, could we get a special rate? This happened to be a company that would make things like solar panels. These large companies, large employers would look for a special rate. In the past, we've had the opportunity through ORS and others to have those communications, and now with the change in the act, we're not quite sure how we would respond to a request like that.
Understand. Thank you. I was having a flashback from a previous life. Okay, all of a sudden, Commissioner Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, sir, or morning, I should say. How are you today?
I'm terrific.
Just a couple of questions. Thanks for being here today. How many times have you testified before the Public Service Commission?
First time I've ever been here.
Okay. And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but the change in Act 258 is what has caused you to come before us today?
That's correct.
Okay. Regarding the special rates from potential businesses that want to come to South Carolina, what's your understanding of how that reduced rate or special rate would be paid for?
I don't really have your business is not something that I have a great deal of understanding about. What I know is there's a process, and in the past, under the previous act as it was written, we would engage the ORS to say we have a request, and they would guide us. Now that no longer exists.
I got you. Would it be surprising to you if ratepayers would have to bear some of the burden of that special rate?
Again, I would expect that would be the case. I mean, if you are looking at a change in rates that's going to be displaced somewhere, one of the things that we operate on is a belief as we look at things like taxes. Part of what business does is bring about an equalization in a county, for instance. The general principle is on tax basis. Residents only pay about 70% of the cost of the operation of government. The rest is made up by business, which doesn't necessarily take as many services. In other words, if there's not a balance between business and residential, the rates are going to go up on taxes. I would assume the same thing would be true in the electrical area, but I don't have any specific knowledge of that.
I understand. And so would it be your opinion that to bring a new business into South Carolina that wanted a special rate, come with jobs and all the other benefits that comes along with a new business, that it's worth ratepayers paying a little bit more on their electric costs?
I would say that it has to be balanced, and I believe that that's a role for this commission to do, is to make that balance. I'm an advocate for business, so my advocacy is going to be that adding another 3,000 jobs at a particular payroll rate and the tax base that it adds to South Carolina, that's my advocacy. someone has to help me balance out what those other issues are, and that would be, in my opinion, this commission or the ORS. Now the statute leaves me without the ORS to be an advocate for the position that I take. So I'm here to say to you, I'm not quite sure how to proceed when I have one of those special type cases. They don't happen all the time. They happen every so often, every couple of years.
Do you have any experience where plants such as BMW or others experience flickers or reliability issues with their electricity?
Yes, sir. Some, if we think back just a moment, in our recent past, like 30 years ago, we did not have as many advanced manufacturing type facilities as we have today. The type of equipment that is in our modern plant needs clean energy, a term that I didn't know until several years ago at BMW, where some of the equipment at BMW, when I was there, could be adversely affected by a flicker, much less a loss. So companies such as BMW were dual fed and had some kind of equipment that modulated the equipment so as to maintain a consistent flow, because there was an awful lot of infrared sensors and other things that could be adversely affected by even a modest change in the level of the rate on what they call clean energy, as it was described to me. As a layman, I'm not quite sure exactly what that means, but I understood that there was some flicker, maybe is a fairly imprecise term, but some kind of modulation in there that could adversely affect equipment, required it to be rebooted for things to stop and for that to occur. I know that there was discussion that went on between our facility engineering group and our providers to make sure that they had clean energy. And there were always instances that can occur, as of course, act of God, rodents in a substation, such things as that, it can cause disruption. And when it does, it can have disruption that's fairly long in terms of resetting a plant. So clean energy is something that we get asked about, and the reliability of energy is something that we get asked about.
Sir, did you or any member of your staff have any form of communication or contact with Duke Energy Carolinas, Duke Energy Progress, or Dominion Energy before coming to meet with us this morning?
On this topic?
Any topic.
We have conversations with our utilities routinely about matters. We are engaged with them in inventory development. In other words, the utilities are engaged in helping us develop sites together with counties and municipalities, and so we have an ongoing relationship with them, yes.
Did they raise any concerns with the Commission's new role with Act 258 and other changes to the law? Thank you for being here today, sir. That's all my questions.
My pleasure.
Thank you. Commissioner Whitfield.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for being here, Secretary Hitt. We certainly appreciate you coming and updating us. Even though we're a judicial body, a quasi-judicial body, we are still economic regulators, and you're in the business of economic development, so it's very appropriate that you be here, and we certainly appreciate you being here. I want to mention a couple of things with you, kind of going down a little bit of the path Commissioner Williams was going down. As I've always understood it, you all, some of the utilities have an industrial rep that'll go out and work with you all in economic development, work with the new industry or existing industry to work with them on their rates. And this commission routinely approves natural gas agreements and contractual matters on a regular basis up here, quite frequently. But to get a little more specifically into the rates, and I'm going to do this as best I can, Mr. Nelson, without referencing anything, just talk in general terms. But the Commission's aware that our industrial rates in the Southeast are among the lowest, if not the, well, one other state beats us in one area in the Southeast, but they're the most competitive, if not the lowest in the Southeast, and all but one of our investor-owned utilities are below the national average, and that one is right at it. So would you characterize us, the South Carolina, as having competitive industrial rates already?
Yes, sir.
And so when you go out, when you and your department go out to sell South Carolina, you're able to say, we have affordable, competitive energy rates here in South Carolina. You're not met with that as being an issue for somebody not coming here on a regular basis, are you?
On a regular basis, no.
Do you know of any jobs or any opportunities South Carolinians may have lost because of it? And can you share that with us? I know some things you can't share publicly, and certainly we're in a public forum, and I respect that, but maybe in general terms, could you share? We want to know, because this is the only forum we have to hear from you.
Well, within the state of South Carolina, there's some areas in which certain aspects of utility rates might be more competitive than in other parts of the state. Certainly that's true, for instance, with natural gas, because of how it comes into the state, and the further away from the source it is, the more expensive it might be. So some areas we may be looking at for a plant, and because of the cost of gas, it's not competitive, say, with one of our neighboring states that might be closer to the wholesale source of the gas, that type of thing. Utility rates are impactful on projects. So in many instances, we have occasions where, because we have quite a few utilities in the state, some that are regulated and some that are not, companies will be looking at the utility rates pretty intensely as part of their decision making. And they may favor one utility company over another and basically say, we only want to look in this part of the state or in that part of the state due to utility rates that are published. But we are competitive with our neighboring states in general, but some areas of the state are more favored than others based on rates, based on the companies that are.
And you are correct. Our investor-owned utilities do differ a little bit, but are competitive.
Correct.
If I could, we've had, and Commissioner Williams had this discussion with you about the change with ORS's mission as it relates to Act 258. And Mr. Nelson, I'm just going to read it from the statute, but I think the change reads public interest means the concerns of the using and consuming public with respect to public utility services, regardless of the class of customer, and the preservation of continued investment in and maintenance of utility facilities so as to provide reliable and high-quality utility services. So the consideration for them, for ORS, as they bring a case to us, is still there, that the investment level remain where that company can maintain and provide reliable and high quality, is the word it uses, utility services. So there's still some of that language in there. I would offer you. That's straight from the statute, and I think, as Mr. Nelson cited, that's part of the topic of within the topic of what you call this allowable ex parte for. So I would certainly share that with you. That's straight out of Act 258 in 2018. Lastly, Secretary Hitt, if you could share with us maybe a little bit what your department is doing. I know we hear and talk often about rural areas, and you and I both being from a rural area, one of the most sparsely populated counties in the state. Can you share with us what the department is doing in rural areas of the state currently?
Well, we have targets for our rural areas, as you know. Elsewhere in our statutes, we have our counties rated from tier 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's a rating system that's done on affluence of our counties by the Department of Revenue, and as a result, it drives certain aspects of our incentive program so as to have some favor for less affluent counties over affluent counties. That being said, out of our 46 counties, we have some that trail others and have consistently and historically for a variety of reasons. I don't know that I see utility rates as necessarily being one of them. I hadn't thought about it quite that way, but typically in our state, the counties that lie along the interstate system do very well. They have most activity, have good transportation systems and the like, and many of the counties that are adjacent to interstate counties do very, very well in terms of density and opportunity for jobs. As we move further away into some of our rural counties, transportation system and other things are not quite as substantial, and it's more difficult to attract companies to those areas. And in many of those areas, because of the low density, they may have electrical rates that are not as competitive as they would in other areas because of capital formation and others. We work with our co-ops and the like to try to do the best we can in those areas, but there is sometimes some challenges where across the line they can go to a stock-owned utility and maybe get a better rate, in which case we can't lure it into one of those counties. That's sometimes what we face. It's gotten a lot better. We work pretty hard at it, but no state in the country has conquered the issue of economic development in the rural areas. We constantly look. Last year, we raised this issue with the governor and the General Assembly, and they have funded us to go and take another approach to some of our rural areas, and we're in the beginning stages of that right now. Should there be an issue involving utilities, regulated utilities that would be helpful to us, you may assume I will come back and want to discuss that with you as well.
We certainly appreciate that update. As we all know, when many of our rural areas were hit after the recession, as everywhere was, some of our rural areas took longer to bounce back, and some of them still haven't bounced back, as you well know. So we certainly appreciate your efforts in recruiting industry and jobs for all areas of South Carolina, and we certainly appreciate you being here. And please come back anytime you would like to in an allowable ex parte format like this. And thank you for being here. That's all I have, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Hamilton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How you doing, Mr. Secretary?
I'm doing fine, sir.
Good. I think it might help you a little bit if you know something of the makeup of this commission. Majority of the commission came here from local government or state government, and we have been involved in economic development in our particular areas for many, many years and support everything that you do and have done. And thank you for it. I'm especially in my district thankful for the inland port in Dillon, and we hope that in Marion and Marlborough County we'll receive some benefits from that. As we understand it, it's possible and very probable that we will. But I'd like to thank you for you. I think you've done a great job. I've followed you since you've been there, and I think the people in South Carolina have been very proud of your work.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
A great team.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Irvin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hitt, it's good to have you with us.
Thank you, sir.
I represent the Greenville-Spartanburg area, and I can't tell you how much we appreciate your efforts years past to get BMW in the upstate. It's been a real blessing for thousands of people, and it has impacted, as you know, hundreds of thousands of people. It's improved our economy and stimulated other growth and development. So having said that, one concern that I have, and I'd just like to hear you address it, we've got 72,000 workers in South Carolina that are affiliated directly or indirectly with the auto industry. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Are you concerned about the trade war with China and the tariffs that have been imposed in terms of how that might ultimately affect, if it goes on and escalates, how that could affect the manufacturing in South Carolina, specifically auto manufacturing?
Long before I took this job, the state of South Carolina made a conscious decision to be, I think, what we would all generally refer to as a free trade state. We have developed and invested a great deal of money in our port and our inland ports, now that we have two, and in our state rail system and other activity in order to be very good at bringing materials in and moving materials out. We have led the United States, all 50 states, in foreign direct investment 3 out of the last 7 years. We have always spent a lot of time recruiting companies from outside the United States. It's been very successful for us. In addition to automotive, as you know, we are the leading tire manufacturing state in the United States, and all of our tire companies come from another continent besides North America. And the point here is that as we have a lot of in and out commerce, and we are training our companies in South Carolina to be able to export more, and we've had export growth every year for the last 8 years, we are part of a world economy here in South Carolina. That is how we have positioned ourselves. The governor, who has good relations in Washington, has taken me along with him, and we have had FaceTime with the trade officials of the Trump administration and explained to them what we think the adverse effects of these tactics are. They are very committed to these tactics. We have had these conversations with them. Our companies understand the tactic. They don't necessarily agree with the tactic. Our companies don't. But they abide the fact that this is the situation that we're in, and we as a state are doing everything we can to support them. We have many companies in this state that have supply chains that reach outside the United States. We have quite a few, and they are affected in one way or another. That doesn't mean they're going to go out of business. It means that they are having impacted their margins. It's been my experience in the private sector, where I come from, that business people do not like adverse impacts to their margins, so you generally hear from them. And so we hear from them routinely, and we try to work with those companies. We don't try, we do work with those companies to try to put their case before the U.S. Trade Representative's office to try to get waivers and other such things. And we have been successful in many instances, and will continue to try to be successful on behalf of South Carolina companies. The business sector would generally prefer not to have this, what they would see as an interference to their balance sheet by this tactic, but they appreciate the fact that we're an advocate for them, and we are one of 50 states that are all dealing with these tactics and the impacts that they're having. I don't know if that answers your question completely.
Well, it does.
That's what I'm trying to.
Yes, sir.
So we are trying to help our companies manage within a changing environment,
Right.
which we do. We not only are engaged in recruiting companies, we're engaged in their retention. So we have a program where we go out and visit many of our companies. Our target on an annual basis is about 600 of our companies. I think last year we visited about 580 of them to talk about their business and what can we do to aid them in any way. So this is an ongoing process. It's dynamic, and so we get a lot of feedback.
Well, the other point is that agriculture is such an important part of South Carolina economy. I don't suppose you really work, or do you work with any big ag companies?
Yes, sir, we do, and we. I think it was the first week I was in the job, Commissioner Weathers came to see me and asked me how we could work together. We've had a memorandum of understanding ever since that time. We have a dedicated project staff for agribusiness, and we have put a lot of attention on processors and others, whether they be in forestry or whether they be in row crops. And I think we've done pretty well there. We routinely announce new agribusiness. Some parts of our state, as you know, Commissioner, really lend themselves to agriculture as the strongest economy they may have. And so, yes, we do work very hard to support our agricultural and forestry groups.
And my point is, of course, that they're severely impacted by tariffs as well, because many of them have had established supply chains and sales overseas, and that has an adverse impact too. So I'm hoping that this will turn around. I think it would make your job a lot easier if it did. So I encourage you to continue the pressure and the dialogue, because, you know, the World Trade Organization, while the administration has not really been kind to it, is a good way to resolve a lot of these trade disputes. In fact, China when they've been ruled against, they've always abided by the ruling of the World Trade Organization. So that's another angle that, I'm not sure why the administration hasn't actively pursued that, but it's there for a reason, and to resolve trade disputes. And that's something I would encourage you to ask them to look into.
We're familiar with the World Trade Organization. We have appeared before elements of the World Trade Organization as it relates to certain of our international clients where there have been issues. I should remind the Commission, there's been a lot of talk about tariffs, obviously, in the last few years. We have always had tariffs. We've had tariffs pretty much since Alexander Hamilton recommended them to George Washington. So most people are not aware. We do tariffs on other countries, and they do tariffs on us. This is part of the business atmosphere. It has been more impactful in some of the business sectors than in others over the last few years. And yes, sir, we jawbone a lot. We don't call press conferences, but we talk with the U.S. Trade Representative's office on a routine basis.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, and I'm pleased that you're taking an active role to protect our large businesses and industries. Do you have any role in promoting or helping small businesses in South Carolina?
Yes, sir. We have a business services division, and we're very engaged in small business. We work through a variety of partners in doing that. But the answer is yes. We did probably about 800 small business projects last year. We also have resources available to them. We have tried to simplify the system so that people who are looking for agency that may support them under the various programs under SBA, for instance, we have a program that allows them to put in certain information, and it sort of funnels them down to the programs that are useful. We also work with the Small Business Development Centers, which is a different program, but we have relationships with them and help fund them. So we have ability to move our startup businesses and others. There are a lot of different kinds of small businesses, and our focus is mostly on non-retail. We're not oriented toward retail as much as we are other types of businesses, including what people refer to as the new digital economy. So we're engaged in a whole variety of innovation, startups, incubators, and the like, and we deal with traditional small business as well. We get a lot of calls, and we try to advise those folks and get them to the right resources. So we spend a lot of time on that.
Refer them to the Small Business Administration, or that type thing?
And help sort it out for them a
Right.
little bit. There's I sometimes think there are people who sit at home at night on the computer trying to figure out how to make money or start up a business. There are a lot of programs out there, but we try to be a little bit of a guide dog for those companies to get them match up with programs that would be fitting for what they're trying to do.
I want to finally ask you about the skills gap that we hear so much about in South Carolina. Would you briefly address this, because it seems like with the new companies that are highly involved in artificial intelligence and robotics, they want highly trained workers or with special skills in math and science and so forth. Are we making any progress in South Carolina in terms of closing the skills gap?
Yes, sir. I think in the last couple of decades we've made enormous progress. I would say that we make the men and women of South Carolina make the most complex consumer product in the world. It's called a BMW. It's the largest selling premium brand in the world, and they build the most advanced models of it. Everything from we don't build the engines here, the transmissions are built here by a company. And of course, as everyone knows, we build jets as well. Very complex composite jets. And later this year, we'll start building military jets in the upstate in Greenville County, where you're from. I think that these things have demonstrated to the world the complexity that our workforce can attain. Our technical education system and our four-year education system and beyond have done a good job of preparing us. We always work on it. The General Assembly a few years ago decided we needed to coordinate that activity between what goes on the commerce side and what goes on between the education side. As a result, they wrote a statute that created the Council on Workforce Development, which is made up of the three education agencies, K through 12, the traditional Department of Education, higher education, and technical education. It also includes a Department of, what is DEW? What's the E stand for? Department of Employment and Workforce, and the Commerce Department. And the Commerce Department chairs and staffs that. And our goal is to try to make sure that what we're training for and what we're recruiting for are a match. Not a one-to-one, but to do a better job and to be able to give our educators an understanding of what jobs are coming next year and the year after and what the skill levels are. I would tell you that 30 years ago, we were a low-skill manufacturing state. And I would tell you today that we're a highly advanced manufacturing state, and we're seen that way around the world. That's the reason that we've been successful. I don't just say it because I worked at BMW, but I think BMW was an imprimatur for us. It showed a change point in South Carolina. As you will recall, since you and I have similar hair color, that 30 years ago, we were losing the textile industry in tens of thousands of jobs. The significance to me of the number of 72,000 automotive jobs is that's roughly the number of textile jobs we lost in the late 80s and early 90s when BMW came in. So what we have been able to do is, through the men and women of South Carolina, demonstrate that we have a highly educated workforce, a highly trainable workforce, that we have the ability to have skill development, and we need to be able to do it. We have been able to do it and demonstrate it in short periods of time. Again, I would say things like Boeing. We have a training program for Boeing. It takes you 43 weeks from the time you enter the training program at Boeing before you can go on the plant floor. And we have a dedicated staff that trains. Last year, I think I was advised just yesterday on a collateral matter that we had trained about 4,200 people at Boeing last year in different types of quality curriculum in order to improve what they do. And this is part of a contract that exists with them. So same thing goes on at BMW. These companies are very complex, and it's not what you learned 5 years ago that matters. It's what you learned last week that keeps them ahead of the curve. So I think our workforce has moved ahead greatly. We compete on the international stage, and as I said, we have led the country in development, in economic development on an international level. And I think that's because of the men and women of South Carolina.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate you being with us today.
Thank you. With that segue from advanced manufacturing to advanced hair color, Commissioner Howard.
I don't know that it's advanced, Mr. Chairman.
Don't hurt my feelings. That's it. I too appreciate you being here, and I will leave here and I will go by Volvo Car Drive, and it makes me proud of the job you're doing when I go by there. And I will, further on down the road, I'll go by Boeing. So thank you very much for the job y'all doing, and you make us proud. Are you familiar with the acronym SEG?
Did you say F like in Frank?
No, S is in Sam, yeah.
And Sam, I don't know that I know, sir.
Well,
I have a lot of alphabet in my business, but I'm not sure I know that one.
Well, it's a concept that's being advanced, particularly by the investment community. And the S is for social, the E is for environmental, and the G is for government.
Yes, sir. I'm now familiar with it.
Okay. And it seems like this is becoming more of an issue for investors to assure that their companies, meet this template on these three things. You want to comment on it?
Again, I would see that as a preference that certain investors would choose, and they would choose to want to invest in companies that meet those three criteria underlying those three letters. And that's an option that people have. It's a great country. You can invest in whatever you would like.
It seems like it's a pretty big issue on Wall Street.
Well, let me say that a lot of the companies that we are recruiting now are very interested and have a leading edge on environmental and electric use, water use, using recycled water or gray water and the like. My old company at BMW measured cars by water per car, electricity per car, and this is an important issue that is worth having a moment to talk about. So when we are competing, we're dealing with international companies that take our criteria and measure it against other places in the world where they have plants and want to know, for instance, why are we using more water, or why is our electricity costing more, or so forth, because they have it. They're not just looking at South Carolina, even the United States, they're looking at the world and are able to make comparisons on a per unit basis, which, as you know, businesses love to measure.
One of the issues that I've read about in Berkeley County in particular is Google and the water supply. Could you comment on the water usage of Google and what is all that about?
I can't talk specifically, nor is any member of my senior staff probably knowledgeable enough to talk specifically about Google. The general area is they use water for cooling. They are a data processing center, and data processing creates heat, and they need to maintain a constant temperature level, and they use water to cool. And to my understanding, they are made application to be able to draw more water through DHEC. That's not anything that came through our office. I am not aware of the specifics of how much water or what the issues are in that, but I'm aware that there are some people that take a different position than Google does on the use of that water.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Whitfield.
Just one quick follow-up, Secretary Hitt. I kind of failed to mention earlier, speaking of highly advanced workforce that you cited we are now, we realize how competitive this is. I was given a speech at NARUC not too long ago. That's our national organization of all 50 states commissioners, and I talked about South Carolina facts, and I talked about South Carolina being the leading tire producer now, and to much of chagrin of my friends from the Ohio Commission, I got some dirty looks because we had just passed Ohio to be that number one. So I understand the competitive nature of that and got a dose of it firsthand that day, and I just thought I would share that with you.
We get the same warm reception in North Carolina and Georgia, Commissioner. And let me say, while I appreciate any plaudits anyone wants to give me, I have a remarkable team of about 100 people that are engaged in this. And in each of the 46 counties, we have economic development staff that are county employees. They're integrated into our team. And we consider everybody, including you, part of Team South Carolina, because one of the things is we're a nice small state. And people come here to do business, and they like us because we know each other. The governor likes to say that we're all probably related. I'm from Charleston, and we think everybody below the fall line's related, but above the fall line, we're not quite so sure. The point here is
keep it that way too.
Point is that we are a size state that has the ability to look at and identify problems and solve them in a fairly quick time. We're a pro-business state. We have been able to grow our state in the last 25 years. When you consider what I call us, sometimes when I'm making speeches, I refer to that past of 30 years ago as we were the 3T state. We were driven by textiles, tobacco, and tourism. And if you reflect on that for a minute, you can realize how much we have changed. We still have tobacco, a little bit, and we still have some real healthy textile functions in the state. And tourism, of course, continues to grow to the resentment of some of my kin in Charleston who wish it would slow down. But we are a functionally different state than we were 30 years ago, and I put that at the success of all of us, not any one of us or even one small team. It's who we are as South Carolina. We have changed who we are, and I think we have now created choices and opportunities for people in South Carolina they didn't imagine. We now have two generations of people that have been born and educated that never knew a time that we didn't build cars or jets here. And that's a remarkable thing, I believe. And I hope it stays as remarkable for the future, and that's what we're trying to make sure we do. And our only goal today was to simply create awareness for this commission of the importance of electricity to our efforts on economic development side. And I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Commissioners, any other questions? like to thank everyone for coming today. Mr. Hitt, appreciate you being here, and we enjoyed your presentation. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned.